My name is Julian and I died in a car accident. Just a moment ago, while driving, I happily shared the good news of successfully winning a major contract with my wife Juliet through a Bluetooth headset. Her tone on the other end of the receiver was gentle. Husband, Lily and I are waiting for you to come back at home. Listening to her words, I had already pictured a warm family, a beautiful wife, and a cute 5-year-old daughter in my mind. All of this was interrupted by a bang. The oncoming large truck on the opposite side rushed towards me at a fierce speed and collided with me. At the moment when the car rolled over, I seemed to hear a very worried voice on the other end of the headset. I vaguely thought, "Sorry wife, I broke my promise." Unexpectedly, after my death, my soul did not dissipate but returned to my wife's side. I saw her break down and cry in front of outsiders after hearing the news of my death, and my daughter Lily shouted, "Dad," loudly in the hospital. My heart was broken. Whenever I reached out painfully, I could only pass through them in vain. However, all of this came to an abrupt end after they returned home crying. She pulled Lily to dry her tears and briskly threw herself at a man on the sofa. It was Henry, whom I had trusted. I widened my eyes and watched Juliet sit in his arms, listening to Lily pull his big hand and tell him that she could finally live with her father all the time. Henry laughed out loud, hugging the two women I loved the most, and said, "The annoying one is dead, and the wife and daughter have finally returned to my side." Later, Juliet appeared in the police station in plain white, accepted the apology of the accident driver for being unable to dodge because of the bad weather, and proposed a settlement. Then, as my wife, she inherited my shares and handed them to Henry to manage the company on her behalf. I watched them appear in public as an independent woman and take over my company as a person who was trusted and repaid his kindness. Finally, the two got married 1 year after my death and kissed at the wedding scene. The guests in the audience were moved to tears and applauded for their love, shouting one after another, "What a good stepfather, treating Lily like his own daughter. What a good couple." Julian must be able to close his eyes in peace now. However, my lonely mother turned white-haired overnight because of my sudden death. She was coaxed by Juliet to sign the share transfer letter and was then sent to a nursing home on the pretext of taking care of her health. Under the secret instigation of Juliet and Henry, my mother passed away hastily less than half a year after she moved in. I'm afraid she didn't know until her death that the gentle and filial daughter-in-law in her eyes was actually a beautiful snake with a kind face and a cruel heart. I watched my mother's emaciated body due to suffering and her eyes that couldn't be closed even at the end of her life, and my eyes were wide open with anger. With endless hatred and resentment, I watched them have a happy family. How many times I rushed forward angrily but could only pass through helplessly. Unexpectedly, when I opened my eyes again, I was sitting in a private room of a restaurant, and beside me was Juliet, whom I had hated for several years. "Julian, what are you in a daze for? Mom is asking you a question." The gentle voice in my memory came into my ears, and I subconsciously turned around. It was Juliet's face. She was smiling brightly, completely different from the blatant and cruel look after my death was designed. I looked at her slightly concerned eyes and turned around to observe the surroundings. It was a peaceful dinner. Beside me was the young and beautiful Juliet, and opposite me were my old mother who looked at me with concern and love and Juliet's fake noble parents who were extremely picky. The pain of the soul dissipating and the hatred of witnessing the happy life of the two people who colluded with each other still lingered in my chest, but when I saw my mother sitting here healthy, it turned into a burst of sadness and ecstasy. I'm back. I'm back before everything started. TSK, Juliet, it's not that Mom is scolding you, but the boyfriend you found is a bit too impolite. Juliet's mother said angrily when she saw me in a daze and not speaking, and her face was full of disgust and annoyance towards me. "Mom, don't be angry. Julian is just too nervous to see you for the first time. He has promised me that after marriage, he will give me the company's shares and arrange for Lucas to enter the company," Juliet said as she held my arm and gently appeased everything with her tone. In my last life, I was attracted by her kind of affinity and gentleness. In order not to let her always be wronged by her mother, I gave her shares and arranged a leisurely job for her good-for-nothing and idle brother. Even so, I still got complaints. Only after my death did I know that Juliet and her family were birds of a feather, one playing the good cop and the other playing the bad cop. After winning the high-profit order and Henry completely taking over the company, I died unexpectedly as their best ex-husband and filial son-in-law. Juliet perfectly combined with Henry, the new entrepreneur, with Lily who had an affair with him and developed my industry together. I gritted my teeth and hinted to myself to calm down. Then I naturally pulled out my arm and picked up my wine glass a little nervously. "Sorry, Aunt. I'm a bit nervous," I said, and drank it all in one gulp, and then excused myself to go to the bathroom to wash my face. Really useless. I don't know what you see in him. He started from scratch, but his conditions are really not good enough. It's just that you have identified him. Behind me was Juliet's mother's mean and picky voice, and my mother smiled beamingly and apologized. I clenched my fists, and my steps with my back to them were full of unwillingness and anger. Because of me, my mother bowed her head and smiled apologetically. Juliet's family was rich, but that was only before Juliet's father inherited it. Juliet's father was not good at business, and Juliet's brother Lucas was a rascal. The Juliet Group had long been gradually declining and was now on the verge of collapse. In order to ensure a life of luxury in the future, they set their sights on me, a dull boy who only knew how to make money and had a humble background. "TSK, Julian, why did you take so long?" A boy about 1.7 meters tall leaned against the wall next to the bathroom, raised his mobile phone, and looked at me rather impatiently. "This is Juliet's good-for-nothing younger brother, Lucas. Lucas's personality is completely different from the elegant atmosphere of his name. At the age of only 17, he smokes, drinks, and fights everything. He is often called to the parents because of skipping classes, gathering to fight, bullying, and causing trouble. When I was with Juliet later, Juliet said to me with a little apology that as a future brother-in-law, I should get familiar with her family in advance and gloriously became the person to wipe his younger brother's ass. I was called to the parents every now and then. Different from the usual fights, this time he and a little gangster girl outside the school pursued excitement and actually got the girl pregnant directly. The girl's family is not easy to deal with either. A shrewd widow mother took the girl directly to the school and asked the school to give an explanation. "TSK, Julian, you pay for Daphne's abortion this time. I'll remember your kindness and say more good things about you in front of my mom." His tone was quite disdainful, as if it was a great favor to me. "This time, I really can't help you, Lucas. Abortion is too harmful to girls, and the girl's family doesn't want her to have an abortion. What you've done is wrong." I patted his shoulder with a slightly embarrassed expression. "Listen to your brother-in-law's advice. Talk to your parents properly and marry Daphne when you're old enough." Hearing my words, Lucas straightened up and his face turned gloomy. "Marry? It was just for fun. Who would really marry her? She's a real wild one." His tone paused and he took a deep breath. "If you can't handle things for me, don't act like you're in charge. You're just a lucky country bumpkin who climbed up from the countryside. And you call yourself brother-in-law? See if I'll let my sister marry you." He watched my expression, trying to see a trace of panic in me. In my last life, I was crazy about Juliet and was most afraid that Lucas and Juliet's parents would unite against our marriage. So when he said he wanted Daphne to have an abortion, I was hesitant and only took out the money when he firmly said that the girl's family agreed. Unexpectedly, he was just talking nonsense. He took the girl to an unlicensed hospital for an abortion behind the girl's family's back, which left the girl in a very weak state. When the girl's family came to the door, his simple words, "My brother-in-law agreed," made me suffer a great deal and pay a large sum of money. Later, after losing the child, the girl was sad but then worked hard and got into a good school. When she applied to my company and met Lucas, the two of them got involved and finally got married. I became the only obstacle in their marriage and love. Daphne, who mourned the loss of the child because of my interference, often incited Lucas to embezzle company funds. This time, I'll stand by and watch how they can be affectionate without me as an obstacle. I'm your brother-in-law. How could I harm you? Listen to me. I looked at him with the eyes of someone looking at a naughty child. Sure enough, he was extremely annoyed, pushed my shoulder aside, and left angrily. I sneered and sent the audio of what he said about the girl being wild to Daphne. Thanks to the fact that he always came to me whenever there was something wrong, I had saved Daphne's contact information long ago. I looked at the read but not replied status of the message on the other side, feeling a bit of anticipation. After I returned from the bathroom, the atmosphere in the private room was rather quiet. Juliet's parents looked at me with an unfriendly expression. My mother was busy pouring drinks beside them. When she saw me come back, she was distracted and a few drops of the drink spilled outside the cup. My mother was about to speak when Juliet's mother shrieked, "So dirty. Country people are so clumsy." Raising a country bumpkin, yet dreaming of climbing up to my Juliet. I saw Juliet sitting still, not making any attempt to stop her mother's words. She gave me a gentle smile when she saw me come back. You see, although Juliet's family wants to use my ability to give them a good life, they look down on my background from the bottom of their hearts. I walked straight to my mother's side, took her hand, and walked towards the door. Juliet, I've thought about it. What your mother said is right. We're really not suitable. So, let's break up. I watched as Juliet's smile froze and a flash of panic crossed her mother's eyes. I patted my mother's hand soothingly and asked her to wait for me in the parking lot first. Juliet's father suddenly slapped the table and turned to Juliet's mother angrily, saying, "What are you making a fuss about? Do you want to ruin Juliet's good marriage?" Juliet's mother was startled by his anger, shrank her neck when she saw her husband's angry look, and said dryly, "Julian, it's not that Auntie looks down on you. It's just that you're from the countryside. Although you've built a company from scratch, you're still a bit inferior in status compared to my Juliet. Well, Auntie won't force you. Just give the cooperation project of S Enterprise to Juliet's family. Julian, don't talk nonsense. Just listen to Mom. Look, Dad is angry." Juliet put her hand on my shoulder and said softly in my ear as usual. But I only felt it was like the tongue of a beautiful snake gently brushing against my neck, just waiting to give me the final blow. "Humph, Julian, Uncle has made a decision. As long as you give that cooperation to Juliet's family, I'll take care of your auntie." I looked at the three of them with different expressions but all looking at me, and I felt like a piece of pork that had been targeted, ready to be divided up at any time. "Juliet, are you hard of hearing?" I said, "Let's break up." I brushed aside her hand and looked into her eyes, saying each word clearly. I walked a long way out of the private room and could still hear the sound of plates being smashed and her hysterical curses. "Julian, don't you regret it?" After I sent my mother home, I briefly told her about the cancellation of the engagement. I bought her a plane ticket back to our hometown and asked her to go back and rest for a few days. I said I would pick her up when I had sorted things out. She just looked at me, stroked my head as she did when I was a child, and said she would support whatever decision I made, then accepted my proposal. My eyes became moist. Thinking that my mother didn't have a good end in my last life, the flame of hatred in my heart burned even more fiercely. Just as I was thinking, my phone rang. I glanced at the note. It was Henry. When I returned to the office, Henry, who had been waiting, quickly made me a cup of coffee and then came in. He put down the cup and looked at me tentatively. "Julian, I heard from Juliet that you had a very unpleasant fight today? You're even on the verge of breaking up?" Looking at his cautious appearance, I couldn't help but sigh. He was really acting convincingly. Henry was recommended to my company by Juliet. She said Henry was an excellent junior student in her school. Since he was just graduating, she thought it would be better to keep the opportunity within the family, so he directly entered my company to help me. She would also drop hints in my ear from time to time, praising Henry both explicitly and implicitly. I even joked with her at that time, saying that she was so concerned about this junior student, maybe he was her little lover. Now that I think about it, I was such a fool to ignore the momentary stiffness on Juliet's face. However, Juliet was right. Henry is extremely capable. In just 5 or 6 years after joining the company, he could completely control my company, and even got my wife pregnant without my knowledge. That's right, the daughter I doted on for 5 years is Henry's child. If I hadn't followed Juliet as a soul after my death in my last life, I'm afraid I'd still be kept in the dark. I picked up the coffee cup and took a sip. You know, Juliet's mother has always looked down on me. Today, she embarrassed me in front of my mother. Well, that's okay. After all, Juliet and I love each other sincerely. But when I saw her mother ordering my mother around, how could any child tolerate that? After I finished speaking, I put down the coffee cup heavily. Sure enough, Henry secretly let out a sigh of relief. If I was just temporarily angry because of Juliet's mother, based on their understanding of my infatuated pursuit of her, they thought I would soon make up with Juliet. Having gotten the answer he wanted, he casually perfunctorily answered me a couple of words and said he would go out and get busy. Before he left, I asked him to take the coffee cup out and added, change it to something else next time. I don't like coffee anymore. I prefer green tea. He frowned instantly as if he thought I had discovered something. I raised my eyebrows and stared straight at him. He replied with an awkward okay. I watched with satisfaction as he walked out with somewhat flustered steps and laughed in my heart, coward. The next time I saw Juliet was at the engagement banquet of the Zhang family's daughter. She changed her usual style of dressing and wore a slightly loose dress. The moment she saw me, the anxious frown on her face relaxed. I ended my conversation with Edward, who was talking to me beside me, and stood still, waiting for her to come up to me as she walked over with a somewhat hasty pace. Julian, why haven't you come to find me? And you don't answer my calls. Don't be angry, okay? She grabbed the hem of my sleeve, looking on the verge of crying, accompanied by her delicate and gentle tone. Edward beside me smiled and teased me. What's going on, Julian? Did you quarrel with your girlfriend? I've met Miss Juliet several times. She has the gentlest personality. Don't be angry with her. I neither affirmed nor denied his words, just pulled my sleeve out of her hand with a faint smile. Julian, are you still angry with my mother? You know my mother is just sharp-tongued. She just cares about me. Can you stop being angry with her? She looked at my actions sorrowfully and called my name mournfully. Today's banquet was attended by people in the circle. I was a new upstart in the circle, and she was the daughter of the Juliet family, which was in a declining state. With her delicate and tearful appearance, as soon as she said these words, I could feel the condemning looks from the people around. Julian, this is your fault. How can you argue with an elder? Julian, Miss Juliet's mother also cares about her daughter. Just listen to her harmless words. Julian, you're being a bit unseemly like this. People around were speaking up for Juliet one by one. She secretly smiled at an inconspicuous angle. Juliet, I did decide to break up with you because of your mother. I can understand that your mother doesn't like me being with her daughter, but that's not a reason for her to insult my mother. I'm indeed the country bumpkin and poor guy in your mother's mouth, but I've achieved what I have today through my own hard work. We've known each other for half a year. In order to get your parents' approval, I've spent 1 or 2 million on health products and luxury goods. Whenever your brother got into trouble, I was the first to rush to the front. Even my marriage to you had to be exchanged for a cooperation project in your father's mouth. How can I still be with you like this? In just an instant, the object of condemnation from the people around became Juliet. Regional discrimination, money-related issues, and insulting one's mother. These were all the bottom lines that the upper-class circle dared not touch and looked down upon the most. Juliet, if I remember correctly, your grandfather also started from being a farmer, right? Little girl from the Juliet family, it seems your family is really making things difficult for others. Juliet stood there, her face as white as a sheet, feeling as if she had thorns on her back. She bit her lip. Taking a deep breath, she gently stroked her lower abdomen, as if she had made a big decision. I'm pregnant, Julian. It's your child. As expected. In my last life, it was also at this time that I learned the news of Juliet's pregnancy. The difference was that in my last life, I had already given up a lot of profits according to the wishes of Juliet's parents. This child made me feel like I was having a double blessing. Now that Juliet and I have fallen out like this, she can only use the child in her belly as a bargaining chip. I shook my wine glass and sneered. Juliet, we've already broken up. There's no need to rush to attribute this child to me. You might as well deal with the matter of your brother getting a minor girl pregnant first. I still need to talk about cooperation with Edward. Don't focus on me anymore. There's no chance for us. After saying that, I went to the Daphne garden with Edward beside me to discuss the cooperation. In less than a week, a video started circulating on the internet. The content of the video was exactly Juliet tearfully saying she was pregnant and my cold-blooded response. The anonymous whistleblower revealed my identity, accusing me of forgetting my roots, going bad after getting rich, abandoning my pregnant girlfriend, and backing out of the engagement at the last minute. Claiming to have a clear conscience, at the end, they announced that they would bring Juliet to the Julian Group at 10 a.m. next Tuesday to demand an explanation and welcomed the righteous public to witness the scene. When Henry presented this video in front of me, I felt nothing inside. After watching the video, he asked me cautiously how to deal with it. I sneered in my heart at his hypocrisy and said coldly that there was no need to care. Then I asked him to go out and started talking to Julian beside me about the cooperation plan with Edward. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the half-open door of the office and the vaguely exposed figure. Without concealing my voice, I said to Julian, "Put this plan in the left drawer of my office. The lock of the office has been broken recently. Arrange someone to keep an eye on it at night." The figure quickly left. I nodded to Julian. The good show is about to begin. Within a week, the accusations against me on the internet grew more and more intense and gradually reached a peak. Many so-called classmates and friends of mine were spreading true and false information on the internet, confusing the public. Even the stock price of the Julian Group became somewhat volatile. The netizens who were deceived and used as pawns were filled with indignation. Even the official Weibo of the Julian Group was overrun and turned into a battlefield, in complete chaos. On Monday afternoon, I received a call from Juliet. "Julian, aren't you willing to admit your mistake yet? We clearly had a relationship that night 2 months ago. Are you still not willing to marry me?" Her voice was still gentle and carried a hint of certainty. Unfortunately, my answer was still no. She hung up the phone in a bit of a huff, telling me not to regret it. But I was somewhat looking forward to the arrival of dawn the next day. Early on Tuesday morning, as soon as I entered the company, I saw a lot of people waiting in the hall. Their eyes were ablaze. Just as they were about to speak when they saw me, I smiled and waved my hand. Why not move to the reception room together? I settled them down and told Julian to prepare refreshments. The hour hand gradually moved to 10. The receptionist brought Juliet to the meeting room. The netizens who had been waiting impatiently in the room seemed to see the main characters all of a sudden and they started talking one after another, saying they would help her get justice. She was wearing a white tight-fitting dress, with a slightly protruding pregnant belly. Looking at her as if she were the goddess of victory, I just felt disgusted. "Julian, don't you really regret it? Why didn't that kind whistleblower show up with you?" I ignored her question. It was just the same old line over and over again. Her face changed slightly, and she looked a bit displeased. Just then, I heard a voice. "Sorry, Julian. I was the one who revealed the news on the internet." Henry stepped into the meeting room holding a mobile phone in his hand. Obviously he was doing a live stream as promised. "Hello, everyone. I'm the anonymous whistleblower this time, Henry, personally recruited by President Julian. I'm sorry for showing up in front of you anonymously before. I just wanted to make Julian turn back from his wrong ways through the video and be a responsible good father." But unexpectedly, after he finished speaking, he lowered his head and shifted his gaze to Juliet at the right time. Juliet understood and stroked her belly, showing a helpless smile. This coordinated act, without thinking, knew it would stir up a wave among the netizens. Even in the quite large meeting room, the buzzing sound could be heard. Henry's words not only stated that he was a talent handpicked by me but also emphasized his kindness, shaping him and Juliet as extremely kind and forbearing. Clap, clap, clap. I clapped my hands and looked at the two people performing with admiration. They were obviously a bit stunned when they heard my applause. Julian? What do you mean by this? Dear journalists, it's almost time. Now, I, the person involved in this rumor and false statement, will explain the recent events to you. Only then did Juliet and Henry realize that there were quite a few people in the meeting room holding mobile phones and mini live streaming devices. Henry's hand holding the mobile phone trembled slightly. He always felt that something wouldn't go as expected. Dear friends, let's talk about it one by one. I played a video in which Lucas's belittling of me and Juliet's mother's picky and disgusted attitude towards my mother were vividly shown. This is the first point. Regarding the claim that I go bad after getting rich and dislike my own background. I think everyone can see who actually looks down on my background. And about me abandoning my pregnant girlfriend? I put down the microphone and nodded to Julian, indicating him to play the next one. Juliet had already sensed something was wrong at this time. She had been frowning since the video started playing. She rushed in front of me and tightly grasped the edge of the table with both hands. Julian, can't we not go to this extent? Let's get married. I'll ask my mother to apologize to you. The three of us can live a good life. This time she might be really anxious, and her words were urgent, not like her usual calm appearance. I mouthed a no as my answer. Julian played the next piece of material, which immediately caused an uproar. On the big screen, there were various intimate scenes of a man and a woman in a restaurant, on the street, in an amusement park. There were kisses, hugs, and even them walking into a hotel. Juliet and Henry's faces turned pale. Henry quickly turned it off and tried to deceive himself, but the journalists on the scene, in order to catch the hot topic, had already started live streaming. Regarding this child, Miss Juliet had been with Henry for my company before she started dating me. You can also see some symbols of key festivals from the photos. As for what Miss Juliet said, that the child was conceived 2 months ago. Unfortunately, I also have a video. Don't play it. I told you not to play it. Juliet waved her hands, trying to stop Julian's action. Unfortunately, with a gentle press, a surveillance video from 2 months ago was clearly played. Juliet and I met at a banquet. At that time, I was splashed with wine by a careless waiter. Juliet, like a fairy, handed me a handkerchief and considerately took me to her car to change into the gift she had prepared for her younger brother in advance. Later, we always met in various occasions, and then I fell in love in a cliched way. I was indeed head over heels in love with Juliet, but my thoughts were relatively conservative. I thought that to respect a woman, I should wait until after marriage. So after learning that she was pregnant, I went to Juliet's house again, expressing my willingness to arrange a well-paid idle job for Lucas, hoping to hold the wedding in advance. After I was reborn, I immediately investigated everything clearly. I found the waiter at that time. She trembled and told me that Juliet had given her 10,000 yuan, and Juliet had promised that she wouldn't be held accountable. The truth of the accident 2 months ago also came to light after I bought the hotel surveillance video at a high price. I was drunk and was helped back to the room by Juliet. 5 minutes later, she came out and knocked on the door of the next room. The surveillance clearly showed Henry's face, and the two of them were hugging and making moves to take off their clothes at the door. It was not until 7 a.m. the next morning that Juliet returned to my room. At 7:20, the hotel room service knocked on the door for breakfast. The video showed everything clearly. The so-called 2 months ago that she had been insisting on was just a lie when I was drunk. She was sure that I would be responsible for her, but she didn't expect that I was reborn and the love filter was gone. As for why I handpicked Henry, naturally, it was because of the strong recommendation of my girlfriend at that time. After I finished speaking, I looked at Juliet. It's over. Everything is over. She slumped to the ground, and Henry also stood there with a pale face. Suddenly, he came to his senses and looked at me eagerly. Julian, I was deceived. You know that. I really admire you. It was Juliet who blackmailed me. If I didn't cooperate with her, she would expose our previous relationship to you. I was just afraid that you would mind. Please give me another chance. Henry quickly tried to distance himself. Juliet on the ground heard these words and looked at Henry in disbelief. She stood up from the ground and started tearing at Henry. Henry, do you have a conscience? Who was I doing this for? Didn't I want to be with you openly? Didn't you say that I should get married falsely and then? Slap, a clear slap sound interrupted Juliet's words. Henry's eyes were sinister, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Shut up." The two of them stopped for a moment, but the journalists on the scene pushed forward with their small interview cameras in front of them. Miss Juliet, did you know that this child wasn't Julian's and deliberately smear him? Henry, netizens are asking how you, being so righteous, can watch your own child call someone else dad. Are you a cuckold? Miss Juliet, does your mother really look down on people from the countryside? Is this discrimination? It wasn't anyone else who saved Juliet and Henry but the police. The police pushed through the crowd and showed their badges. There was silence all around. Who called the police? I did, officer. I called the police. I report that Henry stole company secrets, and the Juliet Group engaged in malicious competition and acquired my company's secrets at a low price. When Henry was being taken away, he suddenly realized that the company's secrets he had secretly taken were deliberately left for him. Haha, so what? That plan, even if it's not for the Juliet family, it's not yours either, Julian. He seemed to be going crazy, not caring about the embarrassing situation being filmed by the surrounding reporters. Henry, since you've realized that I deliberately let you know, how could you not think that the plan was a fake and defective one? My casual words seemed to shatter his illusions, and he was taken away by the police in a state of collapse. Juliet took the opportunity to escape during the chaos. I saw off the reporter friends with a smile, and they also smiled at me with satisfaction. I got my innocence back and they got the truth and hot topics. Before leaving, several netizens who had stayed until the end apologized to me with embarrassment, and I accepted their apologies with a smile. They were used as a weapon against me. Now that this weapon has realized it was deceived, who will it be pointed at? Sure enough, as I expected, the truth spread rapidly on the internet. After all the netizens who had previously cursed me and the Julian Group knew they had been tricked, they pushed the heat to a new high. But this time, the one being attacked was no longer the Julian Group, but the Juliet Group of the Juliet family. The Juliet Group was built up and made strong in Juliet's grandfather's hands, but unfortunately, he had a son who was not good at doing business. Juliet's father had no business acumen and was also reluctant to delegate power to cultivate new talents. He watched his son, Lucas, causing trouble every day, so he decided to find a capable but naive guy to tie down. Coincidentally, I, a self-made and gossip-free, innocent guy, caught the eye of the Juliet family. Although the Julian Group was smaller in scale than the Juliet Group, it was already listed and on the rise. If they could tie me to the Juliet family's boat, the two families would inevitably become an interest community in the future. Plus, I was straightforward, and they weren't afraid that I would swallow up the Juliet family. As for Juliet, she might love Henry, but that was also based on a well-off life. The Juliet family was attacked by netizens in a mess. All the negative things I had received within a week were transferred to the Juliet family. But this time, I had solid evidence, and the police also announced Henry's theft of company secrets and that he had given them to the Juliet Group as he had confessed. Suddenly, this precarious building finally met its downfall. The shares were maliciously sold off. With my authorized investigation and financial offensive, it wasn't long before employees of the Juliet Group came forward with real-name evidence of the company's tax evasion. Finding the evidence so quickly was also thanks to Daphne, who was belittled by Lucas as good for nothing. In the previous life, when Daphne incited Lucas to embezzle the public funds of the Julian group. Lucas was too timid to do it, so Daphne simply took action herself and manipulated several tax payments. This gave me a new clue for the investigation. Suddenly, the Juliet group was rapidly seized and divided up, and its barely maintained operation encountered internal and external crises one after another. Juliet and her mother made a scene at the front desk like crazy, insisting on seeing me. I was a bit curious. Henry had already been imprisoned for many years. How could they still dare to show up in front of me? Juliet and her mother stood in front of me, not as refined and elegant as they were a few months ago. In order to force me to submit, they had overexposed the pre-promotion of this matter, which now had a backlash on them. They wore hats and sunglasses, pulling up their collars high to cover their faces. Julian, I know I was wrong. I was blinded by momentary impulses. Please forgive me, okay? Juliet took off her disguise, and only then did I see the dark circles under her eyes and a slap mark on her face. Thinking about Juliet's father's temper, I guessed that he had ordered her and her mother to come and apologize to me. Julian, please forgive Auntie. Auntie has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. We all want you and Juliet to be happy. By the way, where is your mother? I'll take her out for a stroll and have some fun. Juliet's mother's smile was stiff, and her tone was a bit flattering. She looked even worse than Juliet. Looking at the two in front of me, I couldn't help but laugh. Juliet, are you still daydreaming? You schemed against me, arranged your lover beside me, and tried to blackmail me into marriage. Now it's just as simple, being blinded? By whom? Juliet's lips moved, but she was too ashamed to say anything in the face of my sarcasm. The country bumpkin they had looked down on before was sitting behind the desk, while they were standing in front of me in a sorry state. Seeing that they couldn't come up with anything new, I pressed the intercom to call the security guards. Juliet was dragged out by the security guards, and she shouted in a state of collapse. After Julian came in to report that she had been dragged out, he hesitated for a long time. What else do you want to say? Miss Juliet said that things shouldn't be like this. You should get married to her as in the dream, and then the child would be named Lily. You two would respect each other like guests, and then you would die in a car accident, and she would be heartbroken. Julian's face got redder and redder as he spoke, clearly realizing the absurdity of these words. I smiled and waved my hand to let him go. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the scenery of City A, what if it was a dream? I was no longer that naive guy. The next time I heard news about the Juliet family was at a dinner party to confirm the cooperation with Edward. Hey, Julian, you remember Juliet, right? I heard that after she went home, her father beat her severely, and she had an abortion. Then her father forced her to marry a nearly 50-year-old boss as a second wife. The boss has a child left by his late wife, who is only 5 years younger than Juliet. It is said that he had liked Juliet's gentle and ethereal look for a long time and was willing to pay $50 million to buy Juliet. Her father directly agreed and knocked her out and sent her to the boss's house. I sat beside him, calmly listening to the gossip. Her younger brother, the one you said got a minor girl pregnant last time. The news spread at that time, but it was covered up by the false news of a forced marriage. Edward paused, observing my expression. Seeing that I wasn't angry or displeased, he continued, as a result, the trouble reached the school. Since they are all children from the same circle, soon parents jointly reported it. The Juliet family is not what it used to be, and Lucas was expelled. That minor girl directly called the police and accused Lucas of raping a minor. When the police went to arrest him, a hooligan happened to stab Lucas, saying that he had stolen his girlfriend. At that time, Lucas was taken away by an ambulance, and the hooligan was also arrested. Now that girl is recuperating at the Juliet family's place. Her mother is also a shrew, and she torments Juliet's mother every day, making her scream in collapse. The neighbors outside the villa can hear it. I smiled, nodded, and clinked glasses with Edward. What Edward didn't know was that the hooligan was from the neighboring province and was Daphne's ex-boyfriend. Daphne broke up with him and fled to City A because she couldn't stand his possessiveness. After Daphne left, the hooligan was crazy looking for her. I just gave him some information and left 200 yuan. Sure enough, the hooligan rushed to City A. Now, no one is left out, I murmured in my heart. As for the perpetrator of the large truck that hit me, you can go to jail now too.